Oh, thank you. That was really nice. Forgive me for speaking with notes, but I did write it myself, but I feel I have to write it down for fear I'll omit something I don't want to omit. Firstly, thanks for inviting me and my husband, Sean Taylor, here today. I'm really flattered that you've asked me to speak to you. And ahead of time, congratulations to all the award winners. I look forward to embracing you, or if that's too alarming a prospect, at least shaking your hand when you accept your gongs. Also, I have to say what a privilege it is for me to stand on the same podium as a man I've had on a pedestal for many years. It is such an honour to share the stage with the Honourable Michael Kirby, whom I, along with countless others, have admired as both a jurist and an exceptional human being for decades. Am I on mic enough? It's a bit high. It's better. In case some of you may be wondering why I'm here, let me, if I may, present my credentials. This is a memoir I wrote. It's too big to fit into my pants. This memoir I wrote, albeit very reluctantly, called Much Love, Jack, was published by Allen & Unwin in 2005. I adamantly did not want to write a memoir, but Allen & Unwin cunningly sent me a generous advance. It was a big cheque, and stupidly I spent the money and then I had to write the book. It appeared in this handsome hardcover edition, that's a very old photo, and did quite well. It came out again a couple of years later in paperback and then was published a third time in 2011. I refer you to the blurb on the front cover. It says, Jacki Weaver, what have I done? Oh, it's a pen. It says, Jacki Weaver was dubbed a national treasure by Gough Whitlam, a household name by the Sydney Morning Herald, to which my unimpressed mother remarked, household name, so is sorbent. And the same blurb states, Miss Weaver was dubbed a gay icon by Les MacDonald. A gay icon! I'm sure I can be described in many ways, but I'm absolutely positive iconic isn't one of them. And as for Les MacDonald, it wouldn't be unfair to assume that Les MacDonald might have had a vested interest in calling me a gay icon, because Les MacDonald owns the bookshop in Oxford Street, Darlinghurst. In fact, Les MacDonald's out there flogging my book as we speak, and Michael's book. But back to my credentials. Like millions of other citizens in this putatively fair-minded country of ours, I fervently believe in total equality for everyone. I mean, it's obvious, regardless of their race, gender, age, sexual orientation, and let's throw in hair colour and height for good measure. Then there's the fact that despite being a conspicuously heterosexual, ordinary woman from West Pymble, I've long considered myself, and been largely accepted, I must say, as a bona fide adjunct member of the Sydney gay, lesbian, bisexual and transgender community for most of my life. But probably most importantly, in my 20s, I fell passionately in love with a gay man, and we remained deeply in love for 30 years until the day he died, holding my hand in his. He was, of course, Richard Werrett, theatre director and founder of the Sydney Theatre Company, where he was CEO for 11 years. After Richard's death, dispirited and grieving, I was advised to keep busy, so against my will, I grumpily returned to work in a play at the Opera House called Soulmates, became involved with a fellow actor in the cast, Sean Taylor, and we've been married for almost 10 years, and that's him asleep on that table. I might add here on a lighter note that I love weddings. I've had 5 weddings of my own. Everyone should be entitled to a wedding if they want one. however many they like, for that matter. It was my South African husband, Sean, who proudly recognised the South African accent of a man named Ross, who asked the following question of politician Joe Hockey on ABC TV's Q&A last Monday night. Senator Penny Wong was also on the panel. This is the exchange, and I quote, Ross said, "My question is for Joe Hockey. Joe, I'm a little confused because earlier you said you think all Australians are equal, but on Friday you said you wouldn't vote for marriage equality because you really believe children deserve a mother and a father. So I'm wondering if you could tell us and Senator Wong why you think you and Melissa make better parents than her and Sophie." And Joe said, "Well, I don't believe we necessarily make better parents because we're male and female. I must confess my view has changed since I've had children, and that's very hard. And lots of my friends, whether they be heterosexual or gay, they hold the same view as you. But I think in this life we've got to aspire to give our children what I believe to be the very best circumstances, and that's to have a mother and a father. And I'm not saying gay parents are any lesser parents, but I am being asked to legislate in favour of something that I don't believe to be the best outcome for a child." And then Tony Jones said, "Penny Wong?" And Penny said, "Well, I wish I could speak like Penny Wong, that beautiful voice. Well, there's almost nothing I could say. I think the first logical point is marriage has generally not been prerequisite for children, so I don't think, the logical position holds that just for a sort of values perspective, it is sad, I think, that some families have to feel that they have to justify who they are, because when you say things like that, Joe, what you're saying to not just me, but people like me, is that the most important thing in our lives, which is the people we love, is somehow less good, less valued. And if you believe that, then you believe that. But I have a different view." And Tony Jones said, "Is it hurtful?" And Penny said, "Of course it is, but I know what my family is worth." I might add that earlier, Joe Hockey had actually said, "I think the most hurtful thing that can be said about you in politics or in everyday life is something about your family." Well, Joe, apparently only some families. Moving on, after almost 50 continuous steady years as a jobbing actor, my life changed dramatically a couple of years ago when I did an Australian film that did well in America. No one was more surprised than I was when I won 9 American awards. On top of that, received 12 nominations, including for an Oscar and a Golden Globe. And since then, I've made 11 return trips to America, worked in 7 cities, shot 4 films, including one where I play the wife of Robert De Niro. And this year I have more films lined up and a play in New York. I've read scores of screenplays and met some extraordinary filmmakers, including a brilliant young man who came to lunch at my hotel in Los Angeles asking me to read his script for an HBO TV series. I loved his script and accepted immediately. His name is Dustin Lance Black, and he won an Academy Award in 2009 for Best Original Screenplay for the film Milk, about the gay activist Harvey Milk, who was murdered, shot dead, a victim of a homophobic hate crime. Actor Sean Penn played Harvey Milk in the film. The screenwriter Dustin Lance Black grew up in a strict Mormon household, his father a missionary. Dustin realised he was homosexual from an early age, thinking he would go to hell and sometimes despairing to the point of suicide. Fast forward to 2009, when Dustin won the Oscar for Milk. His acceptance speech was quite moving. Here is some of it, and I quote, "When I was 13 years old, my beautiful mother moved me from a conservative Mormon home in San Antonio, Texas, to California, and I heard the story of Harvey Milk, and it gave me hope. It gave me the hope to live my life It gave me the hope to one day I could live my life openly as who I am, and that maybe even I could fall in love and one day get married. I want to thank my mother, who has always loved me for who I am, even when there was pressure not to. But most of all, if Harvey had not been taken from us 30 years ago, I think he would want me to say to all the gay and lesbian kids out there tonight who've been told that they are less by their churches or by the government or by their families, that you are beautiful, wonderful creatures of value, and that no matter what anyone tells you, God does love you, and that very soon, I promise you, you will have equal rights federally across this great nation of mine. Thank you for the Oscar, and thank you, God, for giving us Harvey Milk. Now, that same Dustin Lance Black has written a script called 8, based on the court case in California about the notorious Proposition 8. No, not Preparation H. And the gay marriage controversy. A few weeks ago, it was performed at a rehearsed reading in New York and in Los Angeles by a cast of several actors, including Martin Sheen, Brad Pitt, and George Clooney, who donated their services along with director Rob Reiner. Australia will have its chance to see 8 with an Australian cast, including Lisa McCune and me, among others, on June the 8th at Her Majesty's Theatre in Melbourne and June the 9th at Sydney Town Hall. That's called 8 by Dustin Lance Black. I'm sorry, but Brad, George and Martin won't be there. And now to something slightly contentious. In 1996, I was thrilled to be invited to be compere and mistress of ceremonies at a star-studded gay Mardi Gras gala concert at Sydney State Theatre. There were some faint rumblings that instead of me, it should have been a gay performer doing the honours, but mostly I was received very warmly, with theatre critic James Waits describing me as a gay-friendly straight. I reckon the wonderful Gary Scale put it better and quite appropriately when he introduced me to the audience with much fanfare and affection thus: "Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and welcome to the State Theatre stage someone we know so well, love and adore. Here she is, the smallest fag hag in Australia, Jacki Weaver." Now, fag hag is a term some people may consider pejorative, but for me, it's a moniker I wear with pride, especially coming from my gay friends. However, although I bask in the title, I must implore you to use it only with the consent of the recipient, and even then only with enormous affection. It's a splendid example of the Australian ironic piss-take vernacular. In fact, chapter 5 of my autobiography is entitled "The Smallest Fag Hag in Australia." And I'd like to quickly, in closing, just read you a paragraph of my own deathless prose, if you just indulge me for a minute more. My mother, Edith, took me to visit my grandmother, Ruth, in England. I was 2 years old, and the trip took us 6 weeks by ship. Every morning, a group of stewards, probably friends of Dorothy, would spirit me away and take care of me. My mother knew I was in good hands, but throughout the day she'd only catch brief glimpses of me, being dressed up, being taught ridiculously camp songs, and generally cosseted, culminating in a first prize at the ship's talent quest, where I danced topless in a hula skirt and sang Buttons and Bows. Gary Scale still refers to me as the smallest fag hag in Australia. Back then, age 2, it would seem I was the smallest fag hag in the world, and the youngest. Okay, I think I've raved on and showed off enough. Thank you very much for having me.